Hello, tonight I wanted to just go over writing correspondence just to kind of give you a feel for what my expectations are for your memos. This is more about content than the actual form. I've created another video about the form for your memos, but this just kind of gives you an idea about the formality of your correspondence and some of the steps to go through when you are writing formal technical kinds of correspondence. So the first thing you're going to do is analyze your audience, and you have to know who you're writing for in order to know what kind of language to use and what kind of format is appropriate. You also need to know the purpose, and these two pieces are going to go hand in hand. Also in this unit we're going to focus on audience and purpose, so you'll learn more about these in depth as we go through the unit. Purpose, if you don't know what the purpose is that you're writing for or what your goal is, what you're hoping to achieve, then you're going to be lost. It's just like with any writing assignment. You need to know what it is you're supposed to be doing. Are you gathering information? Are you providing information, telling people something, presenting bad news, good news, whatever kind of information you're going to give them, you need to be very clear on what the end goal is, what the purpose is. Once you've determined who your audience is and what your purpose is, your next step is to do your research. Find out what kind of information you're going to need in order to answer any potential questions the audience might have, in order to demonstrate to the audience that you actually know what you're talking about. Once you've done your research, you're going to need to determine what is the appropriate type of correspondence, and we'll go over that in a minute. But the type has to do with how formal the actual correspondence is meant to be. The next step is to actually write the correspondence. The final step is to worry about the format, or not the final step, but your next step is to worry about the format, to go through, format it, organize it, get it in a way that's going to be readable and appropriate, again, for the audience, and make your purpose quite clear at the very beginning, the moment that your intended audience begins to read your correspondence. After you've formatted it, you want to go back over it, revise, edit, and proofread. And I always strongly suggest, particularly in a business environment, that if it's at all possible, you have another person's set of eyes on the document. When I used to work at the Discovery Channel, I never ever sent anything out to any of the producers unless I had at least one other person read it in the office, because I wanted to make sure I'm representing the Discovery Channel, and I want to make sure that the correspondence that I send out is quality correspondence, and that there's not some silly typo I missed, or something that information that I represented in a way that isn't completely accurate, or something like that. So whenever possible, always get a second set of eyes, particularly on correspondence that's going outside of the company. And then, of course, the last step is to actually send it. So let's go to the next slide here, there we go. So then you have to select what kind of correspondence are you going to write. Letters are the most formal, and they're most appropriate when sending something outside of the company. When you are sending something out to a customer, a potential client, you want to write a formal letter. They're the most formal. The next, a little bit less formal, is a memo. A memo is usually in-house, although we do have memos that we do send back and forth between companies or organizations. Memos of understanding are a very important form in the business world that we send out all the time, and they're sort of a type of almost like contract between organizations agreeing to do something together or in a particular way. In-house, real quick communication, short, would be email. That's for quick answers, quick information. You don't want the email to be excessively long, just short bursts of information. And then the next, that can be informal, like for Q&As and things like that. If you have an in-house discussion or group are blog posts, things that you would keep in-house, or maybe something for your customers. Think of like an FAQ or something like that, where you where customers or clients can post frequently asked questions, and you can provide answers to those kinds of questions. So those are the general four formats that we use in the technical world as far as correspondence goes. There are 5 principles that you need to use to present yourself effectively in written correspondence. The first is the appropriate level of formality. Again, this is intimately connected to your audience. If your audience is someone outside of the company, you want to be as formal as possible, as professional. You want to communicate correctly. You always want to think back to chapter 2 and the chapter on ethics. You want to think about the ethical situation, and that you are presenting information in the best, truest, most possible light. This next point is probably one of the most important points, and it can be really challenging to do, especially if you're delivering like a bad news kind of letter, you're firing someone or something like that. And that's to project the you attitude. You always want to be very positive. You want to avoid negative language. You want to avoid words like not, never. You want to avoid these for many reasons, but you really want to do this to make it seem, or to present yourself positively, because people are much more open to reading positive than when they see things like you can never do this, that's not acceptable, those kinds of things. It's better to tell someone what is acceptable than to tell someone what is not acceptable. You also want to avoid cliches as much as possible. Cliches like in my opinion, or I'm trying to think of some other good ones, very truly yours, or respectfully. There are ways to conclude them that you want to do professionally, like I'm looking forward to hearing from you, or if you need further information, please contact me. And of course, the last point is to communicate honestly. Again, that goes right back with the correctness. With all technical communication, we've got to be correct and we've got to be honest. So you want to make sure that you're giving truthful information and honest information. Don't say something that isn't, and don't try to sugarcoat things so that it doesn't look as bad as it is. Sometimes it's just best to repeat the facts, just to write down exactly what happened, and that can be challenging when there's some kind of feelings involved. So I always suggest that you draft it, set it aside, and then go back and look at it, and then make sure that you are taking out any kind of feeling or emotion, and that you're just reporting the facts. Alrighty. In your memos, you're going to have a couple of elements that are going to be in every single memo. Now again, I've provided you a little brief video on exactly how to format your memo, but I just want to kind of go over the pieces of it. There's going to be a subject line. The subject line should be descriptive. It shouldn't be too much information, but it should be enough information that the reader knows what you're talking about. So for example, think of it like what I requested when you're sending me an email. If you send me an email that says questions, well, I know you have questions, but if you send me an email that says questions on Chapter 2 in English 115, I have a much better idea of what you're talking about. If you say in your subject line ethical questions, or questions about ethical behavior from Chapter 2, then I know specifically what you're talking about. So think about that when you're crafting your subject line. You want it to give your reader as much information as you possibly can. So you've got your to, your from, your date, your subject, and then the next line is going to, or your next section of actually the body of the memo, or is a clear statement of purpose. And you can say the purpose of this memo is to discuss 2 different forms of netiquette. Okay, just a sentence. It needs to be a sentence. It needs to be a completely correct or grammatically correct sentence, a full sentence, not just to discuss netiquette, but the purpose of this memo is to. And then if you have a brief summary about your findings, you can add that in the next 2 sentences or 3 sentences after your statement of purpose can include the brief summary. Our findings or the research has shown, our research has shown or demonstrated X, Y, and Z. So then you have a couple of sentences where you just, and the purpose of this is when you're creating a memo or any kind of correspondence, you want to create it in such a way that your reader can easily find the information that he or she needs. So you want it to just tell me quickly what this is about, what I'm going to learn when I read it. And then you're going to break it down into the pieces. So for example, if this is a report and you've got different headings about research conducted, the report team, findings, those kinds of things, then you want to have headings. On the format that I gave you that we will use most frequently throughout the class is you will have your statement of purpose, your discussion, and then your conclusion, your recommendation. And those are the 3 main elements that I give you. Now when we do longer reports and longer memos, you'll have more headings and more sections to it. But those are the main ones that we'll be using in this assignment coming up. Netiquette when you're writing email guidelines: stick to business, just go straight to it. Don't waste bandwidth. You guys have been spammed, all of you. I am sure you know exactly what this is. You get, every day I get an email that is all about the student enrollment figures that have absolutely nothing to do with me, that have provides no meaning whatsoever to me, but every day I get it. That's an example of just wasting bandwidth. Email that I just hit the delete button. Don't send out that kind of email. When someone sees your name in his or her email, you don't want them to immediately go to the delete button. You want to make sure that the information that you're sending out is relevant and important to the people that you are emailing. Always use the appropriate formality. An email to your boss should sound different than an email to your colleague. Definitely different formats. Always write correctly. Just because it's an email doesn't mean that you can use or avoid grammar or use text typing kinds of things. You want to be as correct, grammatically as correct as if it was a formal piece of writing. And of course, don't ever flame. Don't ever send a nasty email. If you're angry with someone, if you feel the need that you have to write it down, but don't send it. It just will cause problems, and it's a permanent record of your anger and discontent, so it's better just to leave it alone. And it's always better to talk to the person face to face than it is to send it in an email. Make sure that your message is easy on the eyes. When we talk more about document design, you'll understand this a bit more, but you always want some white space between your paragraphs. You don't want things all scrunched up together. You want very clear sections so that it's easy to read and that, again, your reader can quickly find the information that he or she is looking for. Never forward a message without the person's permission. It is very bad form, and it can be a violation of ethics to do so. So just don't ever do that without the permission or the originator's permission. And don't send a message unless you have something to say. Don't just say yes or thanks or okay or I agree. If you don't have anything to add to the conversation, then don't add to the conversation. Just let it go. Again, we want to avoid cluttering up our email whenever we can. And that's the end of that. If you have any questions, you know where to post them, and I will be back to you soon with more videos. Thanks.